Good afternoon, urban farmers, and today we'll be looking at my tomatoes and doing a bit of a follow-up on those since I've put them in my garden. Okay, let's talk about plants themselves. I think a lot of the plants that are growing in my garden have actually been sown by themselves. Essentially, it's just self-propagated since last year. I didn't really have a plan to put these tomatoes here. This garden bed was going to be for something else, but given that there was like 6-7 tomato plants that grew already, I just decided to leave them as they are and see how they go. And they've actually grown pretty well. They've got plenty of fruit on them. Now, some things that I think I did well, I made sure that the garden beds were raised and all that sort of stuff, and I think that really helped. I also put a bit of manure in the soil before I planted the tomatoes, and I think they gave them enough nutrition to last. Pretty much I haven't fed them since since they started growing, which is good. One thing I think that I could have done a little bit better, I put mulch on top, but only once I put it on I realized that it was mulch from pine trees, which isn't the best. Basically, mulch from pine trees adds a lot of acidity to the soil. I don't think it affected the plants too much. They still seem to produce quite well, although some leaves are sort of drying off and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure whether that's because of pine leaves or because the other thing that I did, I thought I'd be a little bit lazy, and I do not recommend anyone does this, is to use like weed killers to kill weeds. There's this touch-on thing that I use to just, you touch the grass that you want to die, and essentially just gives the grass a lot of salt, and that's how it kills the weeds off. And I think what that might have actually done is touched some of the roots of the plants that I have, and some tomato plants have suffered because of it. I don't think it's affected me too much, only because I've got so many tomato plants, and even though they don't have as much foliage as I would have liked, they don't actually seem to be suffering as far as the fruit set's concerned. The only thing that I can comfortably say that what's actually killing my fruit is the birds. They seem to be eating about 50% of my tomato plants, and the other 50% we just put it in salads and all that sort of stuff. So I think in the future I'll definitely be putting in some netting over the tomatoes to prevent the birds from getting it. I mean, I didn't really mind this year because I've had so much of it that even after I've put like 50% of after the birds have taken 50% of the fruit, I still have more than enough for my home needs. But next year, I don't think I'll plant as many. I'll probably have like 2 or 3 tomato plants and just make sure that those 2-3 grow really well. And in that case, I don't want birds eating all the tomato plants. All in all, I think they've grown really well. They've grown a lot taller than what I expected them to. I've been using these plastic rods that I bought at Bunnings to support them, and they've done a pretty good job. I've cut them down consistently, that is the tomato plants, trimmed them down wherever I saw. I haven't done this in probably a week or so, but anywhere that I saw that there was a little bit of a dry leaf, such as here, I would then go and just trim that off so it doesn't suck life out of the plant itself, and then automatically would grow some new leaves and some new foliage, and then all the fruits would still be hanging off the stem. Some of these fruits I do actually pick them a little bit sort of earlier. As you can tell here, prevents the birds from basically eating it, but as you can tell, it's actually quite red and it's quite nice, even though this footage for some reason has a bit of a red tint. I'm not too sure what's happening there. It seems to be quite okay. Taste wise, it tastes really nice. You can really taste the difference from the garden versus when you buy it from the shops. It's just got a lot more taste to it. And this is what it grew from last year, because I would come into the garden, eat as many of these, and then just chuck the remaining seeds out, and then next year there would be like a tomato plant in the grass. I even had like tomato plants growing in my grass pretty much. All in all, they are really, really, really good. These are tomato tomatoes, cherry tomatoes, which are a reasonable size. They're not too big, they're not too small. You can use them in salads, you can cut them up, or you can just eat them individually like what we're doing at the moment. And amongst my tomatoes, which I think sort of helped because I didn't have too many pest issues apart from the fact that what I've done out of my own cause, which damaged them. I planted carrots, I planted a number of flowers and all that sort of stuff, and I've got some silver beet and all those types of things, and I've even got a zucchini amidst my tomato plants as well, which is not that recommended, but the tomato plants don't seem to be too fussed about it, and I think if I fed them more often it would have been a bit better. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mean, they seem to be quite happy. I think that was about it. I didn't really put too many other things inside. Things seem to be quite happy, and one thing that I think I didn't do last year that I did this year, and it worked out really well, is I reduced my watering of plants. I didn't water it as much as I did last year, and I think that's actually helped bring on more fruit set. My theory is that, and something that I read in other places, is that if you water it less and the plant is at this slight sort of risk of dying or whatever, it starts producing fruit. Therefore it starts producing a way to replicate itself, or to ensure its survival for next year. So the fact that there wasn't as much water this year, that means that it brings on more fruit set. It just means that the plant is forced to bring on fruit so that it can in fact survive for the next season. That's one thing that I reduced, and what I will do is I'll probably feed them in next day or two, which I haven't done so far. Actually, I have to feed the whole garden. I really haven't done any feeding of plants. I don't even know what I'm going to use for feeding just yet. I do have some sea salt, which is like a seaweed mix of some sort, and that basically just gives some nitrogen, which is good. Giving it some nitrogen is probably, overall it's going to be nice for the foliage and all that sort of stuff, but then we'll need to see what I'll probably go and get some compost, and then just mix some compost amongst the stems as well, just to sort of get a bit of extra food for the plants. And then I've also started with the tomatoes. When I cut them down, or the ones that I don't actually need, foliages and all that sort of stuff, I'm putting in my blue barrels, which are used for compost. So I've actually started to compost my sort of pretty much all the green stuff that I have in the garden, and I don't really care if it takes 3 months to compost. I don't really do that. You got to have nitrogen in there, you got to have carbon, and you got to have greens. I don't really follow that too closely because I don't really care. Whatever I have, I just put it into the bins, and eventually it'll rot and it'll turn into some good soil. So whenever it does, for next year's crop, I'll just use whatever I have in those 3-4 barrels, and I'll just use it throughout my garden. Looking forward to that, and that's pretty much it on the tomatoes. So there's certain things that help it grow, and then there's certain things that really didn't do much. Basically, don't use any weed killers in your garden, because it will most likely kill the plants that you actually want to keep. I'm definitely not going to do that next year. And those weed killers really are just like really high salt concentrates, and it just dehydrates the plant. It's not a pesticide of sorts where it's going to be really bad for you and all this sort of stuff, but it is not good for your plants in general, because obviously they're dying. And I'm definitely not going to use iron mulch next time. I might consider using something else that's a bit less acidic, because you'll notice under pine trees there's not much growing because the soil is so acidic. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider for next time. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.